Hi, Laura.
Hi, Barbara.
How are you?
So good to see your face.
Oh, well,
I
thank you. It's so good to see you.
have a little bit of a different background for this interview. You switched it up.
I did. I have come to realize that the afternoon lighting is better over here. When I do them in the morning, it's better in a different location.
All right.
But you're very astute.
Well,
That I already knew.
I
So,
noticed you have a Surratt picture in the background. It's like Sunday in the Park with George, a print of that. So I've noticed that in previous.
oh, okay. I first met when you were in My Mother's Lesbian Jewish Wiccan Wedding.
Yeah, that was a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
8 years.
And you did it again when we brought it back.
That's right. Yeah, we did it
Both
twice.
did. And then you also showed your amazing voice in The Stars of David.
Loved that show. Super fun.
Yeah, you did wonderful renditions of Joan Rivers,
Yeah, I could do Joan
Fran
and
Drescher.
Fran.
And then you appeared and showed some acting chops in The Last Schwartz.
Schwartz, yeah. I was the straight man for that play. That was super challenging.
She was a
Warren
tough.
directed that show, and I just remember with Warren how, he just kept trying to get me to be so strong and like do that sort of inner drill sergeant kind of, and it was very challenging because I like to be the person with the punchline. So,
Well, she was a tough cookie of all the siblings.
oh yes.
And then you were in the Mikvah monologues, and most recently you were in Oh My God.
Yeah, I got to play with J-Dub. Yeah,
And
I saw
a
an interview.
totally different role from any of the others.
Yeah, I loved that play so much. I remember reading it, and Robert wasn't directing it, and I'd known Robert from in other capacity when I was working at the Guthrie in the production world, and reading that play, and I loved it so much, and I was like, oh, I just want Robert to cast me so badly because it just felt like such a great pairing for where I'm at in my life right now and where that character was at. I felt like I was very grateful to be able to play her.
Well, you just alluded to your work at the Guthrie, and I want to talk about that in a minute. But you have worked at lots of other theaters in town here.
Yeah.
How did you develop as a performer?
It's complicated. My history is complicated, and probably most people know, at least part of my story from being a child actor at Children's Theater, and that journey in the last 5 years around calling out the harm that was caused to so many kids at CTC. So that's part of my history too, and of course colors who I am as an artist, who I am as a person. So it's kind of a loaded question, but we won't go too deep. But I started, as a very young child, just being always excited about whatever way I could be performing, whether that was in choir or the little skits that you do at school. I was always kind of knew that was something that I wanted to do. And then I got into children's theater. That was the year that I was 13. So I started working in this, I forget how many seats it is in that theater. It's 900 or something like that. It's pretty significant. So I kind of learned acting chops on a big stage, and also small studio theater stuff as well, and learning classes in small rooms. But that feeling of being on a large stage, it feels very comfortable to me. So just because that was sort of the foundation of professional theater for me. And then I've worked on so many smaller stages around town as well. But for 27-ish years, I worked with Mystery Cafe, which is my ex-husband's theater company. He's no longer in charge of that. But we spent many years doing theater in weird spaces and doing interactive comedy. So I got to exercise a lot of my comedic chops in that arena, and learned a lot from having to tear down a fourth wall and interact with other people, not just actors, but just human beings sitting at a table, and that I think causes. I say if you ask the people who have done Mystery Cafe, the thing that would have what they would have learned the most, I would say it would be to be fearless in your performance, because it is really scary to be that close to people. You're standing next to a table and there's these faces right there. And sometimes, I mean, they're so close you can touch them, that it can be really intimidating. So having spent so many years doing that, and for me, who strangely enough, I'm actually an introvert. I'm an introvert in extrovert clothing. So I actually have kind of a social anxiety. And even after many years of doing it, always like I'd have to prepare myself. So I got pretty good at just having a thick skin around being prepared for anything to happen. And that's what improvisational theater is like. You just have to be ready for anything. So I think that that's a benefit in a lot of ways. And then I've worked at some of the real small theaters. I did a show at Illusion Theater and Park Square, and I've been around, because I've been in this theater community mostly for 30 plus years. I lived on the East Coast for a little while and on the West Coast for a little while, but mostly I've been here. So I've been embedded in this theater town for a long time. And then I took a large portion of that time to work in production and be behind the scenes. And that was something that, there were many things that were harmful about being a student at children's theater back in the 80s. But the one thing that I would say is a gift is that because we were required to work on and learn production and backstage work, I gained an appreciation for that a lot of actors don't ever get, because they don't know what it's like to be the person who's pushing that scenery on stage.
Unless you've done summer stock.
Because in summer stock, you do everything.
Right.
And I think
I've been there.
4 different summers of summer stock. So I got that experience too. Yeah.
Well, at the Guthrie, you were the head wig master.
I was.
Talk about production work.
Yeah, it was. I wasn't the wig master the entire time that I was there, but I was assistant to the wig master starting in 2007, and took over as wig master. I think it was 2014, which I think was the last season that Joe Dowling was there. I was there for like that crossover from Dowling to Haj. So that's around the time that I took over as wig master. And then I just left in November. So I am now freelance and pretty much not doing hands-on, handsy kind of crafty work, except that the things that I want to do. Yeah.
Well, I
have a lot of things I like to do, so.
Yeah, on your Facebook, it says you like to work with your hands. Do you have any other things that you most enjoy?
I have a lot of different things that I've at least acquired, if not mastery, a good grasp on, like knitting and crochet and pottery and those kinds of things, painting. When my kids were little, I had kind of a stall in my creative
repertoire.
Because I had little kids and I wasn't performing. I was primarily a stay-at-home mom for several years when they were really little. And I would draw when I was a kid, and I always loved drawing, but I never really painted. So during that period of time when my kids were little, I started painting, and eventually had for a couple of years a small business doing mural painting and painting entire walls.
Really?
But I love that having that kind of a canvas that is, 15 feet tall by 12 feet wide, it's kind of a cool experiment in just creating a visual art. I love painting, and I haven't done a lot of it over the last maybe 10 years, just because, when you have a job that requires a certain skill, most people don't go home. Like if you're a cook, you don't necessarily go home and cook after you've been cooking all day long. You want to do something different. So at the Guthrie, I was always working with my hands. So when I'd get home, it's not like I was craving doing something with my hands. I've been doing it all day long. So I sort of stopped knitting and crocheting, and I would do it like if I went on vacation, I would do a project while I was, had downtime instead of, a little bit all of the time. So I kind of pick things up. I have a lot of paintings around my apartment here that, the date on that is like 2008. And I go, wow, that was 10 years ago. Or no, how many years ago? Yeah, 10. I'm not good at math. So it's just like amazing to me, because it doesn't seem like that was that long ago that I created this thing. And it's like, how did 10 years go? Well, 12 now for 2008. But yeah, it's, I like to just keep myself busy. I don't like sitting still. I guess that's a big part of it.
Well, I think too, when you have just this innate, you have so many interests, you want to pursue them and do them. I mean, that's what makes us whole, right? I think.
Yeah, yeah. And a funny thing about art that I'm just going to say real quick, because I think it's so valid for artists, especially right now, since we are all on pause right now, especially performing arts and the people who help create that environment. When I was on staff at CTC back in the 90s, and I would drive back and forth on 94, sort of through that little Loring Park area. And there's a building off to the side of that, the highway there, that I would always admire when I drove by it. And it has some artwork on the side of it, these big panels that are sort of triangular panels. And at that point in my life, and I was, a young mom, this was back in the 90s, I had this idea, and I'm not sure where it was born from, but it was the idea that art and practicing art was a luxury. Like it wasn't, and maybe that's the way society sees artists, as it's sort of this, like, when are you going to get a real job kind of thing? Like you hear that a lot. And there was this moment when I was driving by that building and I was listening to NPR, and there was somebody on that was being interviewed, and they talked about the importance of art and architecture. And they were talking about buildings that were being designed, some courtyard or something in New York, that this piece of art was commissioned for that space. And it like dawned on me, it seems sort of ridiculous to me now that it took this for me to recognize it, but it's like, it is not only valuable, it's like invaluable. Is that the right word?
Mm-hmm.
Art, because it is the thing that separates us from every other living creature on the planet, our ability to create art.
Right.
And that's not a luxury, that's like air. We're all artists in different ways, and some of us do it with food, and some of us do it with numbers, and some of us do it with our bodies through dance or whatever. It's like we all have ways in which we express ourselves artistically, and it's not a luxury.
Well, we're lucky that we live in a state that supports the arts. Not every state does, because,
right.
It takes money.
Yeah.
But I don't know how many people, as the population realizes how much artists put into the economy through the work they do.
Well, they're learning that now.
Uh-huh.
Because it's not happening. So all of those little businesses down by the Guthrie, are struggling because the Guthrie's not producing.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
and they're going to find that with, you know, a lot of things as we go through this post-COVID. I guess we can't really say post-COVID because we are in COVID.
Yeah.
Post-COVID awareness, you know, post initial leap off into the world of pandemic that none of
Right.
most on the planet have never experienced before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It's a new normal.
it is. And we're going to recognize more and more how valuable. I mean, a lot of people say sports are valuable, and they are, because the stadium's sitting empty. And that is something that people really value, being able to come together as a group with a common purpose to either cheer on your team or witness a story being told or whatever it is. And that's something that we're really missing right now in our culture. And I think people are recognizing more and more. They're starting to recognize. I saw somebody posted one of those things where it's like, well, artists are not really that valuable in society. And you're like, well, okay, how about all of the Netflix you're binging right now? Let's think about all the artists that created that one show.
Right.
You know, from the tech people, the design, the writers, the actors, like everybody. Those are all artists. And they're making your life through this pandemic easier to tolerate. And that's a valuable thing.
Absolutely. Recently, you posted photos and video from the area where George Floyd lost his life.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you would talk about why it was important for you to be there.
Mhm. I think largely because of the support that I've received from my community, family, and friends in the last 5 years, going through very personal experience in a public way. I recognize the value of being witnessed. You know, when something happens that is life-changing, it's important to lift up those stories and present them. And so when I went down to that space, I felt like there's so many people who can't be here, you know, friends that I have on the other side of the planet, you know, they can't come here. I wanted to be able to at least give them a flavor of what that space is like to experience. And particularly that space, because it's like a sacred space now, you know, it really is. It has an energy that lives very different. And you go down to the Lake Street area where a lot of the burning happened, it's a totally different feeling there than it is at the site, I don't know what they're calling it, the memorial site, I guess. And I just feel like the value of, it's not just being witnessed, it's being heard, you know? So it's not just George Floyd's death and, you know, him no longer being on the planet, it's how the community is being affected in that neighborhood specifically by what's happened. And I just think it's important that we're all paying attention. So that was it, you know.
Well, you have recently been an advocate for change in the community, in the arts community. You're an incredibly strong woman.
It's all smoke and mirrors, my friend.
Well, you're doing great things.
Thank you. I feel like, you know, anything that I'm doing, the only reason that it's successful or has any kind of movement is because other people have climbed on board and lifted that story up.
Right.
You know, I could never do the stuff that's happening in the community right now around creating safe spaces for artists if it was just me standing on a corner by myself saying, hey, this is important. It's like a lot of people coming together and saying, we value this, we think this is worth our time and effort. And so I thank you. I appreciate the acknowledgement that I was, at least I can say, yes, I did call it out.
Well, the work you're doing now is advocating for safe spaces, in rehearsals and performances.
Stage.
Say that again.
Yeah, and backstage for the people who, you know, that's one thing, because I do have this sort of dual life in the world of theater, that I have spent, you know, a ton of time doing production, that I have a really clear understanding of what it's like to be the invisible worker. You know, most of the things, like as a wig maker, if you were paying attention to my job and the work that I did, it usually meant that I hadn't done it well. So with a wig, you don't want to pay attention. If somebody's saying that wig, you know, then
Right.
you did it right. So that's the nature of the lighting person. You know, you don't recognize necessarily that you're seeing this person so vividly on stage because they're being followed by a follow spot, and there's a person running that. You know, so there's all these invisible people helping with the costume changes and all of that. And I think it's so important that those people be recognized. So as a performer, and being able to mobilize a lot of people who are in public eye, and bring them into the work, that we are able to amplify the need for creating safe spaces in every area of theater, not just for an actor on stage, which is important. I mean, we have to have that. We have a dangerous job a lot of the time. So we're looking for, I can't remember where I read this, but it was something to the effect of, you know, we have a dangerous job and we're trying to find the safest way to do this dangerous job. And so that's what I'm about, as someone who was harmed so horribly as a child in a theater environment. A lot of us who are still working in theater find great pleasure is the wrong word, satisfaction in helping young artists and people who don't have the ability to speak for themselves, to help create those safe spaces for people. It's very, very rewarding.
And it's creating a healthier community.
Yeah.
You know, of artists.
Yeah, which will just make everybody better. You know,
Right.
you come up with these ideas and you say, like, we had this discussion a couple nights ago. We're doing, so Theater Artist Leader Coalition is the group of people that I sort of instigated and pulled together, and it's a large group of people. But we had a meeting the other night, and now I lost my train of thought. What were we saying?
Well, you were mobilizing people together to affect change.
Right. Oh, darn it. I had something I wanted to say that was really good. Having senior moment. I hate that. But I guess, you know, my point is just like having all of these people coming together to do this work is so gratifying. And we have this sort of gift of the time right now, with everything sort of being in pause. I hope that more and more institutions, and I don't know if you're doing this for yourself, but it's like, especially if you're running a theater that's running year round, you never really get to stop and take a really good look at what's working and what's not. So there's a metaphor about, you can't really fix a car if you're driving it, right? If the car is not working, you have to shut it off, open the hood, and take a look. You know, what's going on in here? And most people don't have the luxury of taking that time to do that. And right now, in our theater community, we have like this built-in gift of time to be able to really dedicate to doing this right. So when we do get back to work, we will have a set of standards.
Yes.
We'll be, hopefully have a lot of buy-in from the institutions once they get up and running again. I mean, we do have buy-in. You know, you've been very, you know, participatory in our conversations and so supportive of the work we've been doing. Thank you, by the way.
You are.
There are other, you know, leaders of arts institutions or theater institutions around town. They're also very interested in the work and want to support it. And so that's great.
Well, we wouldn't be here without healthy artists. So
Exactly.
very important.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Well, great to catch up, Laura.
Oh, it's so good to catch up with you, Barbara.
Thanks for talking today.
I would happily talk anytime. And I just want to say, like, when you asked me that if I would do this, I felt so honored to be asked, because I've seen some of the other interviews that you've done. And I'm like, if you're putting me in this list of people that I admire so greatly, like, you know, J-Dub and Robert and Miriam, oh, my Miriam, I miss her. So I just feel like I feel so humbled that you would put me in a group of people that I admire so much. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And I admire you.
Oh, thank you.